All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here on the dot. So thanks again for attending our conference today. Hope you're having a good time. This session will conclude at 3:45 p.m., and it is titled Fostering Resilience. Our presenter for this session is Ginger Healy. Ginger began her career as a child abuse investigator and hospital social worker before spending 15 years as a social service supervisor at an international adoption agency. Currently, she serves as a clinical social worker and director of programs at the Attachment and Trauma Network. Ginger co-hosts the podcast Regulated and Relational and is a national speaker on trauma-informed schools, therapeutic parenting, and community engagement. She authored Regulation and Co-Regulation, Accessible Neuroscience that Brings Calm into the Classroom, and its workbook. Ginger's upcoming book focuses on small group curriculum for schools. Ginger is married with 4 children. Her greatest teacher is about developmental trauma and neurodivergence. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I don't know that I want to be behind the podium, so we'll see how this goes. But I just want to be out amongst you. And thank you so much for your time today. I know it's after lunch, guys. I know that this is, it's hard to stay engaged. So please don't hesitate to, if you need to, stand up, stretch. If you have questions, raise your hand. We can have this be as interactive as we like. So I just want to mention a little bit about the Attachment and Trauma Network where I work. It was started by a group of moms who had adopted children internationally and were struggling. We just didn't know what we didn't know. This was 29 years ago when it was started, and that's how I found them. As my oldest son was born in Romania, and I was a social worker, so I thought I knew everything. And I also thought that all you need is love, right? That's what the Beatles told me. And found out pretty quickly, I need more. I need help. This is not going well. And so I found the Attachment and Trauma Network as a mom. And then I was still doing work through our adoption agency for 15 years. And then started working for the Attachment and Trauma Network 6 years ago, and still run. We are a small but mighty team of moms who have in our homes kids that have attachment struggles and have faced some serious adversity in their lives. And we know so much more now. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the Attachment and Trauma Network and explain that. And you'll see on my slides this little heart with this hand going down because we reach in and touch the heart. But also, if you'll notice with this logo, it's like a mother or a father looking at a baby. It's attachment too. So that little hidden Easter egg in there I like to point out. So I think my bio told a little bit about me, but there is information there that you can get a hold of me if you have questions, because I typically come at you with like a fire hose. So just if you want to reach out afterwards and ask questions or troubleshoot, who's in the room? What are you here for? Are you social workers, clinicians, teachers, social workers, parents? Okay. So often when I talk, I'm either doing therapeutic parenting, talking to other parents about how to help heal and soothe the nervous system of kids who have overactive nervous systems because of their early childhood adversity or attachment struggles. So therapeutic parenting, so I talk a lot to parents. And then the other thing I do is go into schools and talk to educators, whoever works with a child-serving professionals about how to create trauma-sensitive environments and brain-aligned discipline, and a lot of, soothing of the nervous system. So I may refer to you as a parent, or all the information is the same. If I say student, you can say child. If I say educator, you can say parent. Whatever you are, therapist, whatever your relationship is, that's skew the information to benefit you most. But let's start off and talk about resilience. What is resilience, and why do we even need to talk about it? It's the ability to adapt and overcome. One of the things we find out as humans pretty quick is that there are bumps in the road. There are challenges. There are trials that we have to go through. And, spoiler alert, that never really goes away, right? We will always have some level of stress in our lives. The stress is not the problem. It's how we learn to manage it. Right? How do we navigate these bumps in the road, these challenges? How do we adapt? Well, plan A didn't work. How do we go, let's figure out a plan B, rather than going, plan A didn't work, I guess it's not going to work. No, resilience is all about adapting and then overcoming, springing forward after trial, right? But often you'll hear that people are born resilient, but that's not the truth. The science of resilience teaches us that we are born needing connection, needing help. We're not born able to solve our own problems, right? We have to have somebody to help us. That skill, that need, we get more independent as we get older. We get more self-sufficient as we get older. But we never really outgrow the need for others. We are just born wired to not go at it alone. People die in isolation, right? People die of heartbreak. We always need that safe, positive relationship. So that's what resilience is that it's skills and abilities that are built. They're scaffolded, they're created. So that is our role as the adult in a child's life, is to be that safe helper, builder, buffer. We can buffer the stress. We can buffer the challenges. We can't take them away, and we don't necessarily want to. We don't grow and change and thrive unless there is some sort of level of activation or stress that will help us change, right? We're just not robots. We are continually making mistakes and learning from the mistakes. So we could almost end the talk here. This is what I want you to walk away from, that we have to have others in relationship to help us build resilience, and we're not born with it. We are born, this is this early attachment cycle that social workers will have seen, but it is worth going back to, because often when I talk about trauma-informed schools or just talk about adversity in childhood and the ACE study, attachment gets skipped over. But really, attachment is the antidote. And when we were going through the pandemic, that tagline, man, that worked really well. Attachment is the antidote. That's how we heal. That's how we go, is in that safe, positive relationship. So the early attachment cycle is just that we are born vulnerable. We're not born independent. We have to have someone there to catch us. And we have to make our needs known. So infants cry. And then the caregiver responds. And every time the need is met and the cue is responded to, the infant starts to build what we call an inner working model, a belief about themselves that tells them, if I make my needs known, someone will meet my needs. I'm worthy of having my needs met. I can trust that my needs will be met. I feel safe. We don't think about that when we look at a baby and the baby cries and we're changing the diaper. We don't consider that, but truly that is being wired and built in. And how many times does the infant cry during the day? Several, right? Now, it's impossible to meet every single cue and every single cry quickly and perfectly every time. That's okay. We don't need to do that either. Attachment science says that if a parent or a caregiver meets the need of an infant 30% of the time, that's enough to start building secure attachment. We call it good enough parenting. So that takes can we get a collective sigh in the room like, oh, right? We have not screwed up all of our kids. So that is one thing. It's the consistency, it's the predictability over time, right? And we tend to do that over 30% of the time. But what we also know is that sadly, many infants' lives, it is not met consistently or predictably. The ACE study, everybody know what adverse childhood experience? Okay, lots of head nods. Tells us that sadly, adversity in childhood is common. And because of that, we are at higher risk for mental health problems, emotional problems, and physical problems. So let me get through this and then circle back. So if the infant makes their, cries, makes their need known, but the need is not met consistently, the infant starts to believe that they cannot trust. They start to think, I must not be worthy. My needs don't matter. The world is an unsafe place, right? I can't trust. And that really starts to build, again, that inner working model, that belief about themselves. So be thinking about that when you have a client or a child or a student that is self-sabotaging, right? Doing behaviors that do not make sense. Or just has these really thick walls that you're just struggling to break down. Often it is because their early attachment needs weren't consistently and predictably met, and they have a hard time trusting. Now, we can rewire that, and that's what we're here to talk about. But it really helps to think about that and understand how important it is to have safe, trusting, attuned relationships that repeatedly meet your needs, even as an adult, in order to build that and rewire that skewed inner working model. Maybe I'll circle back because I started talking about the ACE study because it is just so important to understand that adversity in childhood rewires the brain, completely changes and impacts early brain development. And leading to behaviors in the classroom. This is what I'm talking a lot with teachers about, what you're seeing and the reason that you're seeing that and how we fix it rather than, just trying to stop it, and why it's not working, the way we're doing things now. But understanding that you are at higher risk for depression, anxiety, struggles in relationships, divorce, job loss, stroke, cancer, heart attack, early death have been linked to high ACE scores. So I do think it's important for us as adults to know our ACE score, because when we are working with children, we've got that invisible backpack that we bring with us. And at least for me, I've got buttons that get pushed, right? I've got triggers that get pulled, and I have things in my life that that I have to deal with, that I bring into the room. So, like, for example, my son, when he would come home from school, he would come in the door and I would say, "Hey, how was your day? Grab a snack. Let's get your homework done. We got to go to soccer." You know what I mean? I'm just rapid firing, giving all these directions, and he would just kind of stare at me. And I would say, "Well, what's wrong? Why aren't you answering me?" And he would go deer in the headlights, and that would tick me off, right? hello, I asked you a very easy question. And then I would start to get even more irritated, like, you are being so rude. That is so disrespectful. Seriously, what's your problem? And I would double down, right? And this whole time, he's smaller, so I'm big, and he's like backing away, which makes me even madder. I mean, this went on for a really long time, longer than I care to admit. But in therapy, finally, he loved this therapist. They had a real good rapport, and he felt safe enough to say, well, the therapist said, tell me about after school. That seems like that's a tricky time for you and your mom. And my son said, oh my gosh, after school is so scary. And I'm sitting there thinking, what happened on the bus after school that was scary? Right? Yeah, I come in the door and I'm really tired and I'm really hungry. And Mom starts asking me questions and I can't even hear what she's saying. And then she's asking me more questions because I'm not answering the first questions. And then she's getting really mad. And it's so scary. So I just wait for it to end. I just pray that it will end. And I'm like, oh, it's me. I'm the scary. So for whatever reason, in my childhood, somewhere, somehow, I have this little button that when someone doesn't listen to me, or I think they're not listening, or they're not paying attention, they're not giving me their full, right, whatever, I feel disrespected. And so all that to say, we all have our own buttons and we all have our own ACE score. Now, I don't recommend giving a child an ACE survey. It's shaming. They have no control. Whatever has happened is not their fault, and you don't need to know. It helps to know that they have struggles and that there's something to deal with, but you don't need to know details. And what are they going to do with that information, right? So it's more, I think, helpful to know their resilience score, meaning what supports do they have? What resources do they have? What gaps do we need to fill in? So that's what we're going to talk about too. So whatever has happened in relationship, right, that attachment, whatever attachment was broken or ruptured, we can repair in relationship, right? We are not supposed to be born with grit or perseverance. Children cannot pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They need to be nurtured and that balance of compassion with structure, right? We need both. So we're not survival of the fittest. We are survival of the most nurtured. And that comes from Dr. Louis Cozolino. He's one of my favorite attachment researchers. And Harvard teaches us that it really is about relationship. That is how we build resilience. And it only takes one committed, attuned, safe adult to build that resilience. And it can be a parent, it can be a caregiver, but it can be a teacher, it can be a therapist, it can be a coach. For me, it was a grandmother, right? And it was a 7th grade teacher who knew me and knew that I loved spelling bees. I was really good speller, horrible at math, cannot figure out simple math, but give me a word to spell, and I loved spelling bees. And so during 7th grade, the spelling bee was on Tuesday, and Monday night, I got really sick. Tuesday morning, that 7th grade teacher postponed the spelling bee for me. And I went back on Wednesday, won the spelling bee, took region. I mean, from just because this teacher knew how much it meant to me. I could have lost the spelling bee and it wouldn't have mattered, right? It was that she saw me and knew me, right? And filled in the gaps for what was a pretty rough childhood. So it only takes one, but it can be more than one. So this comes from Harvard too. They have divin into resilience science, and they explain it with this teeter-totter scale with a fulcrum underneath. And what they say is that in order to build resilience, you have got to lift, I can't do this with a microphone, but you know, the scale, you've got to lift up, remove the negative experiences in a child's life while pouring into the other side and weighing it down with positive experiences. That is how you shift the fulcrum and help a child be more resilient. And they talk about this counterbalancing. What I also want you to notice is that fulcrum underneath, because they say you can shift the fulcrum too. There is a gene. Have you noticed? Some people just seem more resilient than others. It can be that a genetic piece linked, and that's that fulcrum underneath. Some kids are born with more capacity, but we can shift the scales, adding on the positive, removing the negative, and then how we shift the fulcrum on the bottom is by strengthening the core skills, not only of the child, but this is the exciting part for me, of who is surrounding that child. The parent, the caregiver, who does the child spend the most time with? You build that person up, they then build that child up. And I love that. Just want to make sure I hit every part of that. I think the next slide talks a little bit more, but this is how I modified it. Talking about, dumping down, opening the box and just raining down, pouring in everything that we can do for this child, and lifting up and then strengthening the core skills. I just want to point to the positive childhood experiences, because when we're talking about adversity in child, how we buffer the stress and surround and help is through these positive childhood experiences. So if during childhood, no matter what negative is going on, if the child feels able to talk to their family, feels like their family stood by them, has community traditions, feels a sense of belonging in high school, has supportive friends, right, protected, the statistics on that are like lowering the risk of negative lifelong health effects by 72%. So I love that, that your ACE score it's not a diagnosis, right? Nothing is. That we can change, we can grow, we can thrive, we can build all those good things, and this is how we do it. It also really talks about how the importance of families, the importance of caregivers, and that coaches, teachers, other adults in the community play a vital supportive role. I just love that. That makes all the difference. So community care, right? Not just self-care. Self-care feels so heavy sometimes. It feels like one more thing to do, and it just feels temporary at times. But community care, us caring for each other, that's the more long-lasting impact that helps us continue to thrive and survive. So I love that. Okay, so Dr. Perry says it really, again, we're going to repeat these words: relationship, right? And attachment and connectedness. That is how we That is how we heal. That is how we move forward. And when we're talking about, I had mentioned the risk of health problems associated with adversity in childhood. So I love that he is saying connectedness is a better predictor. That's what we need to focus on, the positive childhood experience and the connectedness. So let's talk about connection. This is like my most favorite thing ever to talk about. I get to talk about otters. I love otters. Otters are like adorable, right? But they're very smart. They're very social. And we can learn so much from them. Have you ever seen pictures of otters that they wrap their paws around each other? Have you seen this? Oh my gosh. It's like instant dopamine rush for me to see these adorable otters wrapping their paws around each other. Why? Why do they do that? So they don't drift. They are in the water. It's going to get rocky. It's going to get bumpy. Storms are coming. Winds are coming. Hold on to me. I got you, right? Stronger together. They know the importance of safe connection. It's just so beautiful to me, right? Better together. Okay, the other thing that otters do, they wrap their bodies and their tails in kelp. I've got a picture up there. Why do they do that? Yeah. They anchor themselves. It keeps them, that kelp is secured to the river bottom. It's secured to the bottom of the ocean. It's not going anywhere, right? They are safer when the storm comes, when the wind comes, right? They don't lose each other. Mama otters, they need to go dive under the water and fish and hunt. What are they going to do with baby otter? They make these nests of kelp and they wrap the baby so tightly, so securely that they know baby's going to be okay. I can leave and go down and hunt, and I know baby will be there when I get back. And there's just so many great lessons we can learn from that. So I want you to take a minute. And usually when I'm doing this, I'm passing out sticky notes. I do have some if you want some, but you've got things to write down too. I want you to think about who your otter buddies are. It's different than just anybody, right? An otter buddy is going to hold tight during your storm. They're not going to let you go. And it's reciprocal, right? You're going to do the same for them. So who's got your back? Especially during the storms. The other thing I want you to think about and write down and maybe put it on your mirror is what anchors you? What keeps you steadfast? What just keeps you balanced when you're feeling like life is just tossing you to and fro in the waves, right? Anybody want to shout out an anchor? Your dog. Yes, absolutely. Pets give us unconditional love, right? And they regulate our heartbeat. Anybody else? Spouse, husband, absolutely. Yes. A belief in a higher power, something bigger than us. It motivates us. It inspires us. It keeps us like on a path with a goal, right? Absolutely. Anybody else? Your kids? Right. Your mom? I talked about my grandma earlier. My grandma has now passed on, but she is still an anchor for me, right? She loved me unconditionally. I can lean on that when I'm struggling and feeling like unworthy or whatever. I can close my eyes and think, what would she say? I'll tell you what she'd say. She would say, you are worthy. And I would believe her, right? It's easier for me to believe her than myself sometimes. That's an anchor, right? Anybody else? I want you to think about it and rely on them because, you know, it's so hard when we're in the midst of whatever storm we're in to really think clearly, isn't it? So we've got to have that toolbox ready to go that we can pull from. Oh, that's right. I need to call this person, access this regulation tool, whatever it is. Okay. I'll tell you this quick story. A couple years ago, I was at a youth activity and I was chaperoning and we were at a wave pool and I don't know how it happened, but all the kids started linking their arms together. And I looked around and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're otters. And and then the waves start coming in the pool and it gets harder to hold on when the waves come. It's a lot easier when there's no waves, right? But we were in that wave pool and we did that all day long. And when one of the kids would break away, another one would say, oh my gosh, Jaden's floating away. Someone would go get him, right? Nobody left behind. And by the end of the day, in fact, you guys, the next day I woke up, I could not move my arms. And it was just this reminder of this work is hard. Like, it's physically hard, it's tiring. But if I were to do that every day, my arms would get stronger, right? So, a lot of good metaphors there. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about stress. And I kind of opened with saying the stress isn't the problem. We're always going to have stress. In fact, there is good stress. We have to have a little bit of stress in our lives. Otherwise, we would not get out of bed, right? We wouldn't grow. We wouldn't change. If that alarm didn't go off in the morning, I don't know that I'd get out of bed. And so we need a little bit of positive stress activation. So think about like, before the football game, before the music performance, before you speak in front of a crowd, like your heart starts beating faster, right? But then it ends. It's temporary, right? You can handle it because at the end you're like, whew, I accomplished that, right? Maybe I didn't make a touchdown, maybe I didn't do my best, but I completed it. I practiced, I got stronger. So positive stress. Now, tolerable stress is when that stress is more prolonged, but you can survive tolerable stress because tolerable stress is buffered. So, a job loss, a divorce, even a death, really hard, very, very difficult things. We can survive them. How do you survive them? Friends, family, support, resources, right? And I'm not saying that grief ends, but it can be buffered. It can be cushioned, right? You can have resources. So that's that tolerable stress. But if that stress continues and becomes chronic, then it becomes very dangerous. So let me back up and tell you, what happens in our body biologically when stress occurs is that it's a beautiful thing, the way our bodies are built. We, if we experience a threat, any danger at all, whether that threat is real or just perceived, our body helps us. Our body wants us to survive it. So the body gives us stress hormones that activate us and help us to do what we need to do to survive. So say, for example, back in, let's just say, caveman days, if we had to hunt and provide for our family, we'd go outside, and what if we ran into a bear? Well, we have a couple of choices. We can fight the bear. We're there to hunt, right? So in order to do that, we need energy, We need our eyes dilated, our ears. We have to hear, right? We have to become attuned to the environment. So that's, our body gives us adrenaline and cortisol to help us do that, right? The adrenaline speeds up our heart. We can fight the bear, or what else can we do? We can run away from the bear, right? We're going to need some adrenaline to do that. Now, if the bear is too fast, we can't run away from it, and if we don't have our tools to fight the bear, then our other option is to play dead and hope that the bear keeps on moving. So those are your stress responses: fight, flight, and freeze, right? And our body is helping us do that. The adrenaline will help us fight or run away from the bear, or shut down and freeze. That's what the cortisol does, right? So that helps us. Now, let's say we ran away from the bear. We got away from it. We ran to our neighbor's house. We lock the door behind us and we go, whew, that was so scary. But I survived. And our friend hugs us and says, I'm so glad you survived. Things are happening in that moment. That adrenaline and cortisol that has built up in our body is meant to be temporary. We need it when we need it. But once we have survived, we don't need it anymore. So the act of going to the friend and talking about it, of closing the door and locking it behind us, of doing the big sigh and of hugging, that releases those stress hormones. It pushes them out of the body. It completes the stress cycle. We have to complete the stress cycle. We have stress every day. That was a really dramatic, story of stress, but some of us have big stress every day. We have to complete the stress cycle. What happens if every day that bear is at work? Or the bear is in the home. I told you the story of me yelling at my son and punishing him. I was the bear. Now, if we hadn't have gone to therapy and worked it out, and it was an easy fix for me to let him come home from school and say, do you want to go to your room and lay down for a minute? Here's a snack. Let me know when you're ready. I'll help you with homework. That was an easy switch for me, right? But we know that in some of these kids' homes, the bear is there, or at school, or at work, right? Lots of bears. So we have that adrenaline and cortisol going through us because our body wants us to help survive that bear. But if the bear is never leaving, if we are under chronic stress, then the stress becomes toxic, right? Poisons us. We aren't meant to have adrenaline and cortisol coursing through our veins 24/7, but some people do, right? So here's some good news. Let me make sure I said everything that I wanted to say. Okay. Before I go on to what I was going to say, I wanted to stop here for a second at the fight, flight, freeze, because they get so misunderstood and kids get so mislabeled and so misdiagnosed. How many times do I hear a teacher or a parent say, he is so manipulative. He is just so defiant, right? So stubborn, when he is just trying to survive and doesn't know how else, right? He's in a fight response. Or he never does his homework. He is so lazy. I cannot get him to go to school. He hides in the bathroom, right? That is a flight response. Or, lazy, apathetic. I mean, you name it. You've heard all of these. You've seen them. You've probably said them. I've said them. Right? Not understanding that these are stress responses. This is a kid trying to survive, not knowing how. Okay, so let me just quickly go to fawn. It's a lesser heard of or lesser known, lesser understood trauma response, stress response. These are the kids who need a lot of connection. They get called attention seeking. They get called clingy. They get called doormat. It looks like we just cannot fill their cup, right? They're raising their hand. Even if they don't have the right answer to the question, they need to be seen. They need to be validated. That is a survival response. It's a stress response because just like fight, flight, or freeze, the body wants to survive threat and danger, and so it figures out who is the threat and danger, and it appeases them. It befriends the threat. If I get closer to them, they'll keep me safe. So think about kids that are in unhealthy young adult relationships, right? Or adult, but I see this a lot in high school sometimes. Or gang behavior, right? Just trying to fly under the radar, just keep me safe, and I'll do whatever you want. I'll keep the peace. So fight, flight, freeze, and fun. Okay, so we have to complete the stress cycle. We have to get rid of the stress hormones in our body that are building up so that it does not end up becoming toxic stress. Toxic stress will lead to those things that I talked about with the high ACEs. It will lead to stroke, heart attack, cancer, depression, anxiety. That is what those hormones do in our body. So here are a bunch of ways to complete the stress cycle. Movement, I always put very first, very number one, because movement is the quickest, most efficient, best way to get rid of the stress hormones. It gets them out the quickest and fastest. Good news, maybe I'm the only one in the room that's not a marathon runner. Exercise isn't my jam. I know I need to do it, and I love a good walk with a friend. That's okay. That's good. Any movement, right? Yoga, stretching. I like to turn on the music in my kitchen and clean or dance or sing really badly. All of that is movement, and that will release some stress hormones. But movement really is the quickest, easiest, best way. So, I tell teachers and parents, go on a walk with the kid, right? Put them on the trampoline. Keep them moving. Kids are not meant to sit at desks all day. We cannot take recess away as a punishment. We can't. The behavior will get worse, I promise you. Okay, movement. Deep breathing. A lot of times when we are stuck emotionally or in fight, flight, freeze, I tend to hold my breath. Or just breathe shallowly, right? And so then what happens is you're not getting as much oxygen to your brain, and you can't think clearly, and you can't problem solve. So here I was asking my son, what did your teacher say today? Do you have a test tomorrow? What do you need to do? And he's like, I don't know. Or I'd say, why did you do that? And guess what he would say? I don't know. And you guys, that really made me mad. Yes, you do. You know. It's a simple question with a simple answer. But he didn't. He couldn't. In that moment, he did not have access to the part of the brain that could problem solve. It was offline. When you're scared, you can't think clearly. And I just wasn't understanding that I was scaring him, and he could not answer my questions. But if I could make him feel safe, then he could. He very eloquently said to the therapist, here's what's going on after school. And I was like, what? Why didn't you just tell me? Because I wasn't safe to him at that moment, but the therapist was. Okay. Deep breathing, social interaction, right? Like, who feels better after a guy's night or a girl's night or a friend family night, right? Just talking it out, just having a distraction, something fun. Social interaction will release stress hormones. Laughter drops your pulse rate. It releases endorphins. It soothes your nervous system. It sends the message. Like, you can't be scared and laughing at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to kind of feel safe to laugh. So sometimes you got to push play on your favorite movie that makes you laugh. You have to be intentional about creating those moments where you can really find some laughter. Affection, I was going to read this because I couldn't remember. I thought this was... Okay. If you don't have someone to hug, of course a hug is good, but a self-hug can provide proprioceptive input, letting you know where you are in space, like it grounds you. 10-second hugs increase oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It just makes us feel good. So 10-second releases oxytocin, boosts the immune system, eases depression, lessens fatigue. 20-second hugs positively impact blood pressure and heart rate. You guys, hugs are good. And if you don't have someone to hug, this is what I do with kids. When I'm in therapy, I'm not necessarily as a therapist going to hug the child, but I'll model that and I'll say, oh, let's do this, Sometimes I kind of end up rocking back and forth. But crossing the midline of your body gets the two hemispheres of the brain talking to each other, right? And then the bilateral tapping of the hug, or like I'll call it butterfly wings or dragon wings. That bilateral tapping, that rhythmic, patterned pressure shifts the brain, releases the stress hormones. Okay. Crying. We actually, through our tears, will release the adrenaline and cortisol. So, you know those moments when you're like, I need to cry, but I don't want to cry. I'm going to stop crying. Like, it's your body saying, you need a release. You've got to get this out. So let the tears flow. Creative expression. One of my kids was having a really hard time and just couldn't get out of this funk, and I did not know what to do. And I said, get in the car, let's just go for a drive. And we drove past Hobby Lobby, and I'm like, oh, ding, 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 I know this one, creative expression. And I said, let's just walk around and see if there's anything that speaks to you. Like, what do you want to do? And they found this. Have you heard of these diamond dots? Well, it's like glitter. It's the gift that keeps giving, right? They're these tiny little things that 7 years later I still find. But, like, they had created this beautiful expression of art, and I saw a huge shift in their countenance, right? And they came out of their room rather than being isolated. So that's it. The reason that there are so many is what works for some won't work for others, and vice versa. It's not about doing all and doing all at once. Like, what works for you? Name it to tame it. The act of saying it out loud. I'm having a hard time. I am really struggling here. Does a lot of things. If you're alone and no one's listening, right? Like, if you're with someone, it's letting them know you need help. And it's modeling, like, I'm human, and this is how we handle things, as we talk about it and we ask for help. But if you're alone, it still works. It works really well. It sends this message in your brain, she needs help. Let's give her some calming hormones that will soothe her, comfort her, slow her heart rate down, all of that. So it shifts you biologically as well, saying it out loud. And then stepping away. Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. It depends. But it could be as simple as just taking a break, compartmentalizing for a minute, putting it aside and say, I'm going to deal with that later. Or it could be like a physical stepping away from a toxic environment or relationship. But it depends. Safety has to be considered. Okay, anybody, anything pop into your mind as you're saying this or have done this that... any truth out here?
When you said that there are people that, say, no, I don't want to cry, I don't want to cry. I have clients do that all the time. And so I can't force them to do anything, but I'm always like, just let it out. This is a safe place to cry. I'll cry with you. But can you shift it and say, well, let's try the butterfly hug instead? Is that something that you would do? Just shift it to something else? Or?
Yeah. I mean, eventually, I think, having tissues present and saying that creates that safe space. Like, this is truly a safe space to cry. But a lot of people have been born and raised to, like, suck in the tears, right? So eventually they get there. I've also heard, especially like when you're doing a group, if someone starts to cry, our automatic need is that to pass the tissue. If we do that, they'll stop crying. So be aware of that too. Like, making that safe space where they can cry, is, did you have something you were going to say about that? Oh, got it. Okay. So anyway, so yes, talk about all the different ways. Okay, if you're not ready to cry or cry in private, that's okay too. Here are some other things that will shift you as well. So filling the toolbox with a lot of different things. Great. Anybody else? All right. Oh, come on. That's not enough. Okay. All right. Oh, gosh, you guys. I told you. Okay. I just want to leave you with a couple definitions, because a lot of what I talk about is regulation and co-regulation, but you can't talk about regulation and co-regulation without starting to talk about dysregulation, right? So, I mean, it looks like a lot of different things, but just that inability to really manage your emotions. Sometimes with kids, I'll talk about flipping your lid, and I'll teach them the hand-brain model by Dr. Dan Siegel, that it's okay to flip your lid. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to make a mistake. I do it all the time. I'm really good at it. This is a safe place to make mistakes, right? We all have moments of dysregulation. I mean, traffic, right? We could all give our stories. So dysregulation is fine. How do we manage it? How do we control it? Now, often adults want to jump to self-regulation skills. That's great. Remember, I did say as we grow older, we become more independent and self-sufficient. It's a good thing. But truly, we never grow out of the need for relationship, and that's co-regulation. Co-regulation will regulate emotions much quicker, much better. And so when I teach this, I spend the majority of my time on co-regulation. I only have one slide on regulation, self-regulation skills. I have several on this, but just here's what I want you to know. Our goal is not to be calm. Humans are not meant to be calm. We have moments of calm and peace and steadiness and great, and it's a baseline to come back to. But we have moments during the day where we'll be hyper aroused, and that we'll be hypo aroused, and we just need to get back into that kind of middle section. But I don't want us as adults to have, calm, robotic children without feelings. It's just not realistic. It sets us all up for failure. So that's what that slide is. And then just this little slide on mirror neurons, just to let you know that emotions are contagious. Amen, right? That I can be totally cool and fine and regulated, but if someone came in the room and started pushing my buttons, I could easily become dysregulated. So if I'm going to help a child, I've got to be regulated myself. Now, that's not, not 100% of the time. Like I said, we can model, I'm having a hard time. But the mirror neurons is all about, we can make it worse. We can pour gasoline on the fire, or we can control the mirror. We can let them borrow our calm. They can lean on our steady, calm, regulated state and become regulated through that. That's co-regulation. Okay, so quickly to end here, the 3 steps to teaching regulation is that we as adults we have to be regulated first or get back into regulation, right? Take a break and all that. So it always is going to start with us. We just don't say, go to the corner, go to timeout, go to the calm room, get yourself together. We have to do it with them, side by side, modeling it. I wish I had time for this story. Really quickly, Nadine Burke-Harris, if you don't know her, get to know her. But I spoke at a conference with her, and she told this story about how during the pandemic, she was the Surgeon General of California. Can you even imagine, right? And she was working very long hours. She has 4 kids, right? And she would come home late at night, and the kids would already be asleep, and she went in to kiss her daughter goodnight, and her daughter woke up and said, "Can you read me a story?" And she said, "No, I'm sorry." And her daughter said, "Mommy, you've lost your giggle." And if you know Nadine Burke-Harris, she has the best giggle. She's hilarious. She was here last year. I know. That's amazing. She is. She's such a hero. So that was a big flag to her. I've lost my giggle. There's a problem. So she said, this work is hard. It's not that you need to put on your mask on an airplane. You need diving gear. You need an otter buddy, right? All these things. Okay. Step 2 is the co-regulation. Holding space, being present, right? Accepting that what is happening, there's a reason behind it. The behavior is it's communicating something. It's a sign. It's a symptom. It's a signal. So rather than just stopping the behavior, we have to figure out why is the behavior happening? What's happening? Then we can get to, this goes into a little bit of behavior management, but really it's just soothing of each other's nervous system, right? Making each other feel safe. So reflecting back the calm, holding space, being present. Okay. Co-regulation gets misunderstood. It gets misnomered as like gentle parenting or free reign, right? All nurture and compassion, no structure, no boundaries. But it's a higher standard of accountability because it requires the awareness and the understanding of what is going on inside. So it starts with our, I talk a lot about our presence, our tone of voice, our cadence, our, me being the big bear yelling down or me getting down on the knees going, hey, what's going on? What do you need? So here is what it is, and here is what it isn't. I know I'm speeding through. Sorry, guys. So this is how we should be responding rather than reacting. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was just reacting. My buttons were getting pushed, and I was letting them get pushed rather than pausing and going, okay, this is not about me. If I look at a child and think that they're doing something wrong, I'm automatically going to think, well, then we better consequence. We better hold them accountable. They need to be punished. But if I look at a child and say, oh, man, they're probably really struggling right now, then what happens is I automatically think, I want to help you, right? So it's that shift in the lens, getting curious, what is really happening here? Okay. And giving yourself grace, please, to make mistakes. Okay, this is just the one slide. After we, are regulated ourselves and are co-regulating, then we can teach self-regulation skills. But really, truly, this is happening at the same time. Modeling the co-regulation is teaching self-regulation. It's not like it's just a sequential model of what to do, step 1, 2, 3. We're always doing this, but this really, I don't hardly spend any time here at all. We give tools and we model, but it's that safe, warm, attuned presence that really soothes the nervous system and teaches regulation because it teaches what it feels like and how we got there, right? Okay, so if you're a caregiver, a therapist, a teacher, whoever you are, put yourself in as this committed, responsive relationship that you can build the student or the child, whoever you're helping with, their resilience through creating this safety, not like physical safety, yes, physical safety, but felt safety, like where the nervous system goes, oh, I'm safe enough to cry, or I'm safe enough to tell the truth that my mom is really scary, right? It's creating that felt safety, and we do that through co-regulation, building that trust and attachment. That's how we build resilience. Now, when I go to schools, I throw in there, and then you'll reach academic success, because that's what schools want to hear. And it's true, right? A scared kid can't learn. So, throw it out or leave it in, but it's the building of the resilience. I love this quote by Dr. Perry that fire can warm or consume, water can quench or drown, wind can caress or cut. And so it is with human relationships. We can create or destroy, nurture or terrorize, traumatize, and heal. And I choose healing. And I know you do too. That's why you're here. So your safe, warm, attuned presence is the strategy. I'm going to end there.